I'd like to continue my series on the situation in Gaza and the Middle East and prophecy. I would like to call this one Jacob Have I Loved, and it's part 2. Jacob have I loved, and Esau have I hated. In my previous article, that's Malachi 1:3. In my previous article, I pointed out that the Arab-Israeli conflict is really a continuation of the wrestlings of Jacob and Esau, and will one day soon engulf all of the world in their struggle. It is biblical and prophetic, and is in Genesis because it's a fundamental and universal conflict which will one day culminate in Armageddon. In this article, I'd like to clarify a few things, for there is much confusion about the particulars of this subject. The original conflict in Genesis, when discussing the problems Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had within their own families, centered around issues about and around divine election. God chose Abraham. He didn't choose Lot. Abraham was a pagan idolater, and yet God chose him, revealed himself to him, and called him to leave all to follow God. And Abraham did. He followed God by faith. God chose Isaac, but not Ishmael. Ishmael was the firstborn of Abraham. Thus, by man's standards, he should have been given preference. But God chose Isaac and not Ishmael. God chose Jacob, not Esau. It's not that Jacob was a better person or that he was more spiritual. Election is solely of the grace of God. God chose Jacob. Isaac chose Esau over Jacob, but God chose Jacob over Esau. In the Malachi passage above, God is said to have loved Jacob and hated Esau. This is the language of election. It has nothing to do with whether or not God loved them personally in the sense that we understand love. Love and hate in this context have to do with acceptance or rejection for a certain God-ordained task. God loved Israel in setting his love on them, not for any other reason. He chose them because he decided to. He set his love on them in a way he hasn't done to the Irish, the Norwegians, or the Zulus. I'll quote Deuteronomy 7:7-8. The Lord did not set his love upon you nor choose you, because you were more in number than any people, for you were the fewest of all people. But because the Lord loved you, and because he would keep the oath which he had sworn unto your fathers, hath the Lord brought you out with a mighty hand, and redeemed you out of the house of bondmen, from the hand of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Deuteronomy 7:7-8. It would be good to consider at this point exactly what it was that God was electing this remarkable and miraculous family to do. That's what gets overlooked often. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were chosen to be the human conduit through which he would send the seed of the woman, as promised in Genesis 3, into this world. They were chosen by God to be the Messianic line. It's not that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were chosen to salvation, while Ishmael, Esau, and Hagar were not. This divine election is about who would be the ones through whom the Messiah would come into the world. God was not going to bring the Messiah through Ishmael or Esau. Ishmael and Esau and Hagar would have to submit themselves to the revelation given through Isaac and Jacob and eventually through all the Jews. That would be humbling, and they would have to accept the fact that, as Jesus told a woman at the well, salvation is of the Jews. A good many of the descendants of Ishmael and Esau did indeed do so, for at the time of the explosion of Islam, most of the Middle East was either Jewish or Christian, or variations of Christian. Even to this day, there were quite a few Arabs, Syrians, and Assyrians who hold to some form of Christianity. But as it turns out, Esau would become restive and tire of submitting to the Jews, as in the prophecy, or coming behind in contrast to them. One way that this restlessness worked out in history is the development of a religion which would codify the grievances of Ishmael, Hagar, and Esau, namely Islam. Islam is the restlessness of Esau. It is the vindication of the spurned Ishmael. In fact, Islam has a feast and a special mosque to commemorate the sacrifice Abraham made of Ishmael unto God. It nourishes and commemorates every grievance Ishmael and Esau had at being cheated, supplanted, and disenfranchised, supposedly, by Israel. Our God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's not the God of Ishmael or Esau. They are not patriarchs, and there is no such thing as Abrahamic religion. The modern moral and spiritual descendants of Esau actually, for the most part, resent this very, very much. They don't want to submit to the spiritual yoke of the revelation which would come from the seed of Jacob. So they have crafted their own counterfeit to nurse their bitterness. This has developed into something called the everlasting hatred. God calls it out in the book of Ezekiel, and it will be the cause of many severe judgments to come. Shalom.